This episode of Cheat Codes, a Sickle Cell podcast, is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This episode of Cheat Codes was supported by Global Blood Therapeutics.
What's up, Warriors? We're back with another episode of Cheat Codes, a Sickle Cell podcast with me, Dr. Z.
And me, Dr. C.
Dr. C, man, we've been doing a lot of good things with this podcast, but I think this one is really special. We really able to bring on some guests today that I'm super proud we were able to draft.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk to these guys. We've had artists on, we've had comedians on, we've had warriors on, we've had lots of doctors and scientists on, but this is something special. This is a little different.
Yeah, so we've got two really cool guests. I'm going to introduce the first one. We've got Martenzie Johnson. Martenzie Johnson is a writer for the Undefeated. He's an ESPN writer. And for the Warriors who are listening, for the Sickle Cell docs who are listening, you might remember a story that came out 4 years ago that talked about Billy Garrett Jr., an NBA player who was, high profile, coming out of Chicago. Martenzie broke that story and really brought a lot of attention to sickle cell disease. We're happy to have him here with us. Martenzie, man, welcome to Cheat Codes.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate, the offer to come on.
No, man, it's our pleasure. And our second guest, man, is... I was able to just run into this legend, man, on a webinar a few weeks ago, and I knew that I had to have him on Cheat Codes. Dr. Callahan, man, I'm going to tell you who this is. You might not even believe it, but we've got Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, the man responsible potentially for the greatest reception in NFL history. We've got Santonio Holmes with us.
Yes, sir. Dr. C, Dr. Z, Martenzie. Thank you guys, man, for having me on this show. Super excited, to get a chance to talk about sickle cell disease. And, I'm excited to spread the word and become, a positive voice for the sickle cell community.
Man, we love it, and we're here for it, man. This is what we need in this community. And I'm gonna start off with you, Martenzie, man. I want you to tell us a little bit about your involvement with sickle cell disease. Where did it all begin?
It's actually a very close thing to me. Of my immediate family, there are 5 of us, and my sister has the disease, and my brother and my parents all have the trait, and then even my niece, my brother's daughter, has the trait as well. So sickle cell has kind of just been my entire life. I've been around it. I've been around my sister having crises. She actually had a crisis either the day before or the day of her senior prom, and so I've just seen this my entire life. It's just kind of, if your sibling has, the flu or the cold, like that's just how familiar I am with this, because it's just something I've been around my entire life. So that was really the impetus for me writing the story on Billy Garrett. I've tried to do that with a few of my stories of, like lupus, for example. My aunt and my sister-in-law have that, so I wrote a story about that last year when lupus was a topic in America. But no, I've just wanted to highlight particularly things that affect African Americans in this country. And as you all obviously know, sickle cell impacts a lot of Black people here, and so that was why I just wanted to, it was a family thing, but also a Black thing. And for sports, sickle cell isn't really all that well known, and it's not really as talked about as much as, say, breast cancer. So, I went to Chicago and spent a day with Billy and seeing, him going through these strenuous workouts, and just kind of asked him, like, is there ever concern about what's worst case scenario here for you? And if you've read the story, that he basically said, I know that one day I might die from this, but I really love basketball. I really want to play. And so it was a great experience for me. And I thought, as you all are kind of saying now, it was an important thing to have out there because, again, unlike, say, breast cancer or Alzheimer's, sickle cell isn't as prominent of a disease that gets the resources as some of those others. So, yeah, like I said, I enjoyed that story. And again, for my sister and everyone else affected by this disease, that's why I wanted to write the story.
It was a great story. And I have to say, really well written too. I mean, a beautiful story and really well put together. So thank you.
Yeah,
I
no,
enjoyed reading it.
that's the kind of press that we had never had in sickle cell disease, so we appreciate that. I'm gonna pass the ball to you, Santonio. Now, I want to hear, for the Warriors out there that may not know. Tell us a little bit about how you started getting involved in sickle cell disease. Tell us about TJ.
Right. So Martenzie, wow, just to hear, that you have to live with this condition in your family, brings a little sadness to my heart because I know exactly what you're going through. And just like you, I have a son who was born with sickle cell disease. And this was in 2002. And I was just a senior in high school, unaware of what this condition was, how it affected individuals, personally. But more importantly, I didn't know what I needed to do to survive and to be there to care for our son until I realized that at some point, he's not going to live as long if you don't get the proper medication, the proper treatments, and learn how to actually take care of himself for, the existence of his life. It made me aware that I need to learn about the condition so that I could teach him and educate him better than my parents had educated me, that our family was living with this condition, and that I need to be more aware of someone living with this condition so that I don't have a son or or a daughter born with this condition. And because of that lack of education through my parents and in our family history, it has just created that big hole in my heart that I need to fill. And that's by being a sickle cell warrior. I have to now stand up to the plate and fight for my son, fight for his life, make sure I had a better job and I understood how to continue to keep that job, maintain a great living so that no matter when the ball may drop for him in needing expenses to take care of his medical conditions, I was readily prepared. So that was just my way of being a warrior, for my son, and knowing that I had to be the sole provider for his medical expenses. At that point, even though I knew I couldn't do anything about his condition up until today.
Wow, man. Yeah, that there's a lot to unpack there for both of you. Both of you guys set the stage so beautifully here. One thing I want to dive a little bit more into, Santonio, is when did sickle cell trait sort of become something that you started thinking about in your career? Did it affect you along the way? Did it affect your body? Did you know that it was there? When did it really start? Did it make an impact in your life?
Absolutely, Dr. Z. When I found out about sickle cell trait is probably my second or third year I was in college. And I had to fly home to visit my son who had been diagnosed with a crisis probably around the age of 2. And that's when I realized, how did sickle cell come about, or how did our son get it? And that's when I found out that I was a trait carrier. And I learned that 2 people carrying the trait could possibly produce a 1 in 4 chance that his kid would be born with the disease. And I just think God had that plan for me to be this voice to speak for this condition, because I still envision myself being the Super Bowl champion, the college national champion, the high school champion in football. But I also had to realize that I had to become another champion in life that was to help fight, for what my son life was faced with, because I was unaware that I was just a trait carrier and that I could cause so much damage to an individual's life just by being uneducated.
Wow, man. I mean, Martenzie, you're with your family and with your sister, seeing your sister and seeing what she went through. The thing that really struck a chord with me, man, is you're saying that, when you grow up around it, that's the only normal you know. That really hits me deep, man, because there's nothing normal about the life that sickle cell patients go through, the suffering that they go through, right? But you're exactly right, man. I mean, it becomes like just day to day. You're just going through the motions.
Yeah, I kind of compare it to how people who grow up in poverty, most of them will likely say, I didn't know I was poor until I kind of separated myself from people who I grew up around, because everyone else was kind of like me. And not everyone I knew had a sibling or a family member with sickle cell, but I just knew that my sister had it. But I have allergies. I thought it was the equivalent to that. I thought we just all had these kind of conditions, and there was nothing really special about it. I knew she was in pain, but I really didn't truly understand that amount of pain that she was actually in. And I think to both what Santonio was saying too, of not knowing this thing or not understanding what the trait is and how that can lead to the disease is, African Americans' access to healthcare. In the story, I put how, African Americans are more likely, I think 10 times more likely to not be insured than white Americans. And then you talk about their actual access to healthcare. So hospitals and facilities in their neighborhoods where there's less and less of these medical facilities in, higher concentrated Black areas. But that's not to say that my family didn't know this stuff. But again, I just thought this was a thing that people went through. I didn't understand the severity of it, and I also didn't understand how this was mostly, not all, but mostly only affecting Black people, and how that can lead to the type of care that they get. And Billy gave me an example of, I believe he was in New Jersey and had a crisis, and so he went to a hospital. And they basically didn't believe him because, you can't really see the actual pain that he's in. But they didn't understand the sickle cell diagnosis, and they didn't want to give him the care or, I guess, the pain medicine that he needed. So he had to go to a sickle cell center, not just a hospital, to actually get the treatment that he deserves. And that might have just been, ignorance on the part of the medical care professionals at that particular hospital. But it also just speaks to how Black people are treated in the healthcare field. And, the doctor I spoke with for the story kind of called it a double whammy of it's a Black disease, right? There's an example of Hank Aaron getting a letter in the 70s, like basically a fan of baseball, wishing sickle cell upon him. So people understood what it was, but so it's a Black disease, mostly only affects Black people. And then they need pain medicine to help them, but then too many Black people wanting something, and then there's an issue there. So it's that double whammy of, are these drug addicts, or are they just trying to get this because they want to abuse drugs? And also, it's a Black disease too. And so, again, like just growing up, I just didn't understand the severity of this thing. I saw the pain that my sister was in, but like I don't feel it, so I don't know. Like I know what stubbing my toe feels like. I know what getting a cut on my arm or getting a bruise on my knee feels like, but I cannot understand, the cramping feeling, the severe cramping feeling of a sickle cell disease crisis. And so it was the norm for me, but only now am I truly understanding what my sister was going through. And, the thing that I guess we all don't really want to talk about is kind of the life expectancy of, she's getting into her 40s, and that's when you got to kind of start worrying about these sorts of things. But again, it doesn't really come up that much, but that's just what I'm used to, and that's the unfortunate part of it. And I think whether it's sickle cell or any other disease is, do people truly understand what in this instance the Warriors are going through? And I'm not sure that we do.
Yeah, man. It's crazy because sickle cell disease is the first disease that we know that it was the first disease that we figured out the exact problem, right? It's like one amino acid that's different, right, from everybody else. We figured that out. People love that, right? Scientists in the 50s, scientists and doctors were like, this is amazing. We love this. We can understand this disease. We can figure out. They fell in love with the mutation, but they never fell in love with the people who carry the mutation, right? And that's the problem. The problem is that the truth of the matter is this is a disease that exists in this country because of the transatlantic slave trade. Right? And that comes with all sorts of like psychosocial things, right? That comes with that mentality that, this is affecting people who historically have been oppressed in this country, right? And you're right, man. I mean, these patients have a huge burden on them. They're in pain. Their body's not getting the oxygen it needs, right? That's the pain they're feeling. And then on top of that, you've got a medical system that's saying your pain is not real, right? I mean, it's unfair. That's why we're so thankful for people like Santonio and the Third and Long Foundation, the awareness you're spreading, man. Tell us a little bit about the Third and Long Foundation, Santonio.
Absolutely. Just to touch on the point you made, Dr. Z, about activity. One of the things that I have learned as a young athlete and now as a father and a former athlete, that your body and responds to activity. Your heart pumps a little bit harder when you're in fight or flight mode. And if you realize that when that heart pumps that much harder, you can feel the energy, the oxygen, everything run through your entire body that allows every limb to be ready to be active, no matter if it's in pain, no matter what's the situation. You're gonna fight through that when you're in the crisis moment of your life as a normal person. But as a person living with sickle cell, it's tough to fight those pains when you can't even describe where the pain's coming from, how it's actually affecting you, what I need to do to make this pain go away. We can find cures for ailments that are happening to the normal people, but like you said, Dr. Z, there's a condition that we have actually found the pinpoint source and how to affect this disease, and still no one is actually willing to step up and say, here's the exact way, here's how these families need to start actually taking care of themselves, and let's show these test results to the world, and let's broadcast how these families are living and how their health is increasing, and the likeliness of them passing away has diminished. So the Third and Long Foundation, we started the Third and Long Foundation after catching that game-winning catch in the Super Bowl. I knew I had a platform and a voice at that time to speak up about the things that were affecting me in life, and I realized that so many other players before me were actually doing just that. And I was reading books, back in my time in playing ball, and still now, a few books that I read, educated me on starting a foundation. And when you start a foundation, it allows people to believe and to see the work that you're putting in, but more so it gives you opportunity and connections to the network world. And with that foundation, it allowed me to partner with many hospitals across the United States. I get to visit any hospital in the world because I have a voice, and I'm fighting for a condition that needs to be changed, that has affected so many people like me and hindered so many young athletes from becoming the superstar player that their mind and their hearts and their body are actually set on. But because we're not giving them the proper tools to train themselves as little kids to build that heart so strong that it's able to pump the oxygen and strengthen those lungs that they need to be able to survive for 30 to 40 years, even though they're exerting so much energy, willing to play these sports that causes for them to train day and night, sleep very little. But it's because we're not educated enough as athletes as to what we need to do to better care for ourselves. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why the Third and Long Foundation is here to show the awareness of how it affects those mostly affected, which are our athletes, in my opinion, that want to become successful and take care of their families and be able to support and cast that their families need. We just need the right treatments and the right education tools so that we can provide these kids with the right kit so that they can survive.
I love that, man. I love that.
Cheat Codes is brought to you today by Global Blood Therapeutics. GBT is a biopharmaceutical company committed to discovering, developing, and delivering life-changing treatments that provide hope to underserved patient communities, including sickle cell disease. GBT is grounded by a mission-driven culture and built with a team of experienced and passionate people committed to making a difference in the communities it serves. Cheat Codes is grateful to GBT for supporting today's episode and for serving the sickle cell community.
You talked about the game-winning catch, man. Tell us what you did with those gloves, dude. The people need to know that story.
Yes, those Reebok gloves, they went for $70,000 to the highest bidder. Man, that was a great moment in my life, and I really wanted to do something really special with these gloves because I knew how much it meant to the community of sickle cell. And that helped me jumpstart the finding of the Third and Long Foundation and being able to support sickle cell disease. I wanted this campaign to be, something that highlights this campaign, which is that game-winning catch. It was that moment that God gave me to showcase to the world that here's a person that is actually living with the sickle cell trait, and he's able to do these miraculous things. But what about those ones that are living with the trait and the condition that can't do these miraculous things? And here I am on the pedestal on 10 toes where God has placed me to be the highlight of the world so that sickle cell disease could become a more broad, aspect of our world than just me making that Super Bowl catch. So I definitely want to, tip my hat to God and giving me that opportunity to be the face for sickle cell.
Tip our hat to you for taking advantage of the opportunity and
Thanks,
giving
Dr.
back.
C.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing, man. It's amazing. You left me.
Martini, hold on, Dr. Z. Martenzie, excuse me. If you didn't know, there are quite a few guys that, played in the NFL that are actually, supporting sickle cell as well. So we can definitely, chat about that and see how we can bring a story full circle and eventually get more in the connection between Billy Garrett, the football players. There are guys that are running track, living with the condition or the disease. And I think I recall hearing about one kid with running track recently with sickle cell disease. So not too sure, but I think I did overhear that recently. So we can definitely make a good
No, yeah,
connection.
that's definitely a good idea. And I just think to what you just said about how you use that moment in your career to kind of bring attention to this, and how there have been so many moments where if sickle cell wasn't the disease that we're talking about, it would have blown up so much more. And I think so much more attention would have been given to it. But I think of two kind of moments in history and how it would have been so different if it wasn't sickle cell. And that's kind of the problem that we're dealing with, is how much people actually care about this disease. Is one. So I think you create Third and Long in 2011?
Yes, we started in 2009, but the finishing touches came in 2011. Yes.
2011. So a year before that is when the NCAA finally started testing for sickle cell trait, which, as you all said, there was a breakthrough in the 1950s. So that's, if you know that there's this disease that affects black people, and there's majority black people in college football or college sports, why did it take so long for you all to actually test for this? And then Ryan Clark is kind of the best example of, this man lost his gallbladder and his spleen because of this trait. And even still, it hasn't reached the level of, let's say, Steve Gleason and ALS, or Lou Gehrig and Alzheimer's. And that's a tragedy, because this was front and center for everyone to see. I think people remember what happened to Ryan Clark, but if you quizzed them on it, I don't know how many would know that he has sickle cell trait, and that's the reason that it happened. And if that happened in 2020 with any other condition, I think the entire world will be like, oh, that's what happens when a disease is not properly treated. And I feel like it's just an afterthought of what happened to Ryan Clark, where this man had, things taken out of his body because of this trait and how it relates to sports and stuff like that. But yeah, Santonio is obviously doing great work with his foundation, but I think it needs to go beyond that. Not to say that scientists aren't doing everything they can to find a cure for this, or if there can be a cure for it, but I think that, particularly with professional sports, how much attention is given to other diseases and other conditions. I think we're dropping the ball here when it comes to sickle cell, because let's say the NBA and the NFL that is majority black, you have to imagine a good percentage of these athletes have this trait. They either don't know that they have it, or they have it, but they don't understand what the condition means. And, they're not only putting their lives in danger, but we're missing opportunities to bring more attention to what this is. So I think there's way more work that needs to be done. But Santonio obviously is, leading the charge here. And like you said, there's more athletes out there. Billy Garrett, I think, is just a great example of, having this disease, which not, obviously there's a difference between a trait and a disease, and we don't know how many people have the disease out there, but, him being one of the more prominent, professional athletes with it, and using his platform of professional basketball to bring attention to it, including naming, his basketball team after it. There needs to be more of that. And hopefully, more journalists and myself can highlight these sorts of things.
For sure. I mean, this stuff's so important that you guys are doing bringing attention to sickle cell and funding. You look at that. You brought up ALS. That ice bucket challenge brought in $100 million. That funded scientists. There's new treatments coming out of that. We need stuff like that for sickle cell. You got 100,000 people in the U.S. living with sickle cell disease, and not nearly enough work going on to find answers. So really appreciate you guys bringing your platforms and highlighting sickle cell. And I think trait is a whole nother area. There was this horrible story in the New York Times the other day about medical examiners blaming police-related deaths on sickle cell trait. You brought up Clark, and he went to Denver and got a splenic infarction. That brought in a whole bunch of screening, and it was a big problem for young athletes trying to play. Another study came out and said boot camp participants with sickle cell trait did just fine, but I think it's important to know you have sickle cell trait and do the things you can, like stay hydrated to prevent problems. So, as much as we can raise awareness about this, the better. So
Yeah.
thank you guys.
I played with Ryan Clark in that game, so I was actually in that game, and I struggled a lot. When I didn't realize what the Denver Mile High Altitude was all about, the moment I put my practice clothes on to go out for my warm-up, I jogged around the field one time like I always do before every game. I run around with my headphones on just one time around the field just to feel the energy in the stadium. And I ran directly back into the locker room because I needed an inhaler.
Wow.
And I didn't know living with sickle cell trait had this kind of effect on me playing in Denver. And then to get in the locker room and sitting right near the bathroom and hearing Ryan Clark, and the doctors are talking about what his situation and his condition is like, and hearing him pee blood, in the stall, and it's like, wait, that's what he was feeling? Like these same things that I'm actually feeling, living with this trait that he can't breathe, don't realize how much energy you are exerting, out here in this condition, your body not receiving the proper oxygen that it needs. I didn't realize how much that affected us. And on that plane ride home, seeing that Ryan had to get off the plane and end up staying in the hospital, that really affected me. And I think that's what really turned my wheels to get me focused on being a support catalyst for sickle cell, because just like a lot of people don't know, we're living with this trait that we don't even know what it does to us as athletes. But we knew that we're warriors because we were able to push through these conditions or these setbacks, over time, and just continue strengthening and believing that we are stronger than sickle cell. And I think that is the push that led Ryan Clark over the edge, playing in Denver, is that his power to play for what he loved was greater than his understanding and knowledge of the sickle cell condition and how it affected his livelihood moving forward.
Wow. Hey, had you and Ryan connected about sickle cell trait prior to that game?
Prior to the game, no. But I think we knew of Ryan Clark's condition going into that game. But me not knowing that I would be affected being a trait carrier, because up until that point, still I wasn't tested for sickle cell trait. So back in the 90s is when they started, testing babies, and I was born in the 80s. So therefore, growing up with this condition, it was like, we don't know what you're dealing with. We just know you have complications. And as I got older, I realized, what the situation actually was, why my son was dealing with so many complications, and the things that he explained to me that affected him and how they affected him made me realize that these were the same exact things that I was going to as a 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-old in elementary school, having pains in my right arm and my forearms, where I'm always grabbing my arms like, man, why does my arm hurt? Like there's something wrong in here. But it's nothing hurting, but it's something really painful. My lower back hurting, my calf muscles cramping up. So even throughout my entire football days, it was tough to wear long sleeves or even wristbands and things around my hand, tape my wrist up because it would cut the circulation off, in my hands. And I knew that as I played. So it affected me because now I got hurt thumbs and I got to catch a football, but I need my thumb taped up. So now I got to realize I can't tape it up too tight because it's going to cut the circulation off to my hands, and that affects me. And those things came about learning my body as I got older and wondering why my body would cramp up so much. Even though I was drinking electrolytes, I was well hydrated. I wasn't drinking alcohol during football season or the off season. I was actually training hard, but I didn't realize how much my body was missing iron. I was very deficient in my iron and in my vitamin D count. I wasn't very big on drinking milk because it affected my stomach. It didn't make me feel good. So understanding like all these things that living with sickle cell condition and sickle cell trait, it affects so many underlying things in your body that we, like Martenzie said, we need more doctors to tell us what things that affect us that we can make these changes on that are so minimal that can continue to elevate, our existence.
No, absolutely, man. I mean, look, man, we're talking about 1 in 12. 1 in 12 black people carry the sickle cell gene, right? We're talking about numbers here. Let's talk a little bit more about numbers, man. There's a child born every hour in this country with sickle cell disease. Every hour, right? That's 24 kids born every day with sickle cell disease in the United States, right? If we expand that globally, right? Let's get out of America here. Let's talk worldwide, where the real problem is sub-Saharan Africa, right? The Middle East, Indian subcontinent. There's a child born with sickle cell disease every 2 minutes, right? There's nothing rare about sickle cell disease, man. The only problem is it affects people of the wrong skin color. That's the only problem, right? But, I'm just thinking about the story you told about Mile High Stadium, man. And I'm not a writer for the Undefeated, but, man, that's a story. That 2007 game, with Ryan Clark and Santonio being in the locker room and feeling it, man, that is something. I wonder how many kids go through that, right? And don't know what's happening, right? They're not aware of their sickle cell trait. It's 1 in 12, right? Just by the odds, you've got, 4 or 5 people with sickle cell trait on a football team then, right? If you're just playing probabilities. That's insane.
Yeah, what the young man that passed away, sorry, Martenzie, the young man that passed away in high school or college, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, right
And
here in
it's
Michigan.
like,
Right here in
yes,
Michigan,
and it's
Central
like,
Michigan
wow,
University, man.
Like, come on, like, why are we not educating these kids from birth in their childhood? Why as parents are not finding out more ways to help our kids, fight this struggle? Because this is an important factor in our lives, even though we want to be athletes. We need your support. We need you to care for us more than just providing a shelter for us to live in or, food on our back. We need you to be more fighters in this healthcare world so that we could get more professional help. The black doctors in the world, if more of you are serving the sickle cell community, then you need to be a part of what we are doing today and reach out to those sickle cell communities, those activists and those advocates, and support what they're doing so that the message of what you're doing can be resonated throughout the country, because you have the power that holds, the key to healing this community.
Yeah, I was gonna say, speaking of that game in Denver, after that happens, and for someone who has a trait right along with Ryan Clark, what apprehensions, if any, did you have about playing football after you saw what happened to him?
I was way more aware of my oxygen, my iron. So therefore, after that game in '07, I used an inhaler for the rest of my career because I started now feeling those side effects from how hard I was working. And I was wondering, okay, it's okay to be a little bit tired, but if I can be honest, I've told this story to so many players, so many friends. I want to take a nap before halftime of every game. I could not go out and exert so much energy in the first half of a football game because I didn't think I would have enough reserves in the tank for the fourth quarter, all because of living with this sickle cell trait. I knew I couldn't go out and exert injury, and the reason being is because we played against Marshall University when I was at Ohio State. First half of the game, I think I had maybe 5, 6 catches, 7 catches on the game for about 200 yards, and I could not finish the second half of the football game because my entire body, I caught an entire body cramp. The first time I had ever felt this in my entire life, and I didn't know that it was probably because of my sickle cell trait. Back in oh 2, 3, 4. It's either '04 or '05 season that we played against Marshall University, and I had a really great game. Ended the game with like 200 and some yards, but I couldn't play the rest of the game because I had to go and get 2 full IVs in my body. So that led me to understanding, like, wait, you were dealing with this back in college and you didn't know why you were cramping up so much. And then when I got into pros, the extra training during the off season increased because now we're not going to school and training. I'm actually training from January all the way until August now. And my body would just hurt and break down. And those doctors just made me more aware of what I was dealing with because I started complaining more. I started telling them that as I'm getting older, certain things are actually changing in my body type and how it's affecting me and how I train. And that's when they made me more aware of what I need to do moving forward.
Yeah, I interviewed John Brown, who's now with the Bills, at least last season he was. And when I spoke with him, he said while he was still with the Cardinals a few years ago, he contemplated retirement because he basically couldn't walk at times because of how severe reactions he was having because he has the trait. And that's what I imagine a lot of players, like Spencer Ware, I spoke with him for the story too. And he didn't go to that extreme, but he did say like it's hard to kind of keep his legs when he's training for the season just because of kind of that lack of oxygen that he's getting compared to everyone else. And, that's just, I think that's probably the more underreported part. I tried to ask Billy about it, like basically just what it feels like. And I got some of that from him, but I think that's maybe where I missed something and where reporting on this has been missed too, of just describing what that pain feels like. So Santonio is talking about he's having a game of his life and then he has to go out for the rest of the game because a whole body cramp, which I don't think, again, we kind of make lighter cramps. So like LeBron had cramps in one of the finals games.
That's right.
And so it's just something you don't really take too seriously, but that's for people who've never had a cramp, right?
I
And
got carted off the field, Martenzie.
yeah.
They had to. I'm trying to walk off the field, and the body locks up, and someone has to catch me as I'm falling down because I'm going straight to the ground. I can't move my neck muscles. My fingers were locked. My arms were folded. My calves were gripping. My toes were curling. When I say like my stomach was getting tight, I'm like, yo, why can't I move right now? And they put me on the cart, and they literally had to just lay me out in the locker room the entire time until my body was able to catch up to just relaxation. And then they injected 2 IV bags. By the time I came out, it was like 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter of the game. I had to go.
You guys won though, right?
I went out and played, made 2 catches, a first down. The catch that I made for the first down, we kicked the field goal to win the game after that catch.
Wow.
So it was a big moment, for me to make that sacrifice to want to get back on the field. But it's because I wasn't even educated that I carried sickle cell trait, that the doctors at Ohio State would even want to test for this kind of condition to see if an African American kid actually is affected by the sickle cell trait or even the condition. And that right there alone should be more attention drawn to why this condition needs to be covered and need to be more talked about.
And I think that's some misperception because I think we do say, oh, it's just trait. You don't have the disease. It shouldn't cause you pain. But the thing is, when you get in really extreme circumstances, like you're playing college football and you're extenuating, stretching your body, or you're getting dehydrated, or you're going up to Denver and you're in low oxygen tension, that's when you can have sickling, even with the trait, and get into trouble. So I think, especially around this conversation around athletes, it's important. But at the same time, we don't want to set up a wall where we say, oh, you shouldn't do sports if you have trait. We want to, because obviously you can be Super Bowl MVP with trait, but we want to make sure people know the right things to do to try to avoid problems.
Absolutely. One more thing, Dr. Z. We played in Cleveland. I want to say this was in '07, '08 year, maybe that same year. We went out in Cleveland. It was probably like negative 12 degrees. And when I say that was probably the worst game I ever played in or even had in my career, I usually go out and try to warm up before the games. And the minute I walked outside and tried to warm up, I was jogging, doing my normal routine around the football field, and my arms locked. So I was running down the field, and my arms they wouldn't move like this. They were locked, like they wouldn't come up. My arms wouldn't fold, and so I'm like, wow, it's really cold outside. Not knowing that this is my sickle cell affecting me at all costs. It's not just the weather. It's the fact that my body isn't getting any type of oxygen to be able to support what I'm about to, endure, which is go out and run, for over a mile or so, during the football game.
Living in a family affected by rare or chronic disease can be isolating, and sometimes the best medicine is simply connecting to the voices of other people who share your experience. This is why BloodStream Media produces podcasts, blogs, and other forms of content for patients, families, and caregivers affected by rare and chronic disease. Visit bloodstreammedia.com to learn more.
There's one thing we didn't talk about sickle cell trait that I think we should while we have you guys here. There's a rare, but deadly complication of having sickle cell trait, right? And that's a very rare type of kidney cancer called renal medullary carcinoma. Okay, and the reason we should talk about this is we were just talking about Titus Davis, who used to play for Central Michigan, and he died at age 27 with sickle cell trait and renal medullary carcinoma. His brother, Corey Davis, is a wide receiver who plays for the Jets now. And the truth is that if you have sickle cell trait, the chances of you having renal medullary carcinoma are very low, right? But you need to know about it, right? You need to know about it. And we're talking about 1 in 12 people who need to know that this is a real thing, right? Like, this can happen. And this is something that you need to be aware of. And this is why you need to see your doctor regularly. And this is why you need to listen to your body. And you need to look for those early warning signs. And you need to be checked regularly. I think that's something that we don't talk about enough.
And I think it's mainly because, Dr. Z, the medical care, the expenses that it costs for a person to just go see a doctor for his own health conditions. We don't know how to take care of our bodies without going to see a doctor, but it costs. And every family can't pay that cost to take care of their bodies when their kids need to eat, when their family need transportation, when their family need a roof to live under. It's so difficult. And I think we should hold these owners and these business owners to understanding that with the healthcare system that you are providing through your insurance, that this needs to be covered on all levels, no matter what condition this individual have, that at any moment they could drop out of this business because of their kid or their family member that really needs them, more than this job does. But now this individual loses a job, can't pay the bills, can't pay for food, and can't have the medical expenses taken care of. So how do we win in this situation when it costs us to even just go get our body checked out to tell us what's going on? And that's why I say more doctors need like you to be partnering with these sickle cell communities and these advocates and these foundations, because we have all the answers, but we don't have the support that we need.
Yeah, I mean, well said, man. Well said. I don't know, man. You're motivating me. I want to change the world, man. This is amazing.
And you said about the kidney. Like, what are some of the feelings that say an individual that is feeling their kidneys acting up? Like, what would that feel like internally, if you could describe that, if a person is understanding signs of a kidney failure?
Yeah, a lot of times it would be blood in your urine. You see,
Okay.
like dark urine would be one of the first signs maybe that you'd have a kidney tumor. The trouble is that they're hard to detect. unless you're having those symptoms.
Yeah, they are hard to detect, but like he said, I mean, that blood in the urine, pain, right? Pain, and it's less common to have pain, but blood in the urine. But like the thing is, you might not even see the blood, right? Like this might be blood that is there that you can't see because it's in such a small quantity, right? And the only way to have that, the only way to know is to check, which is not easy, right? Nobody wants to go pee in a cup at their doctor's office and have their urine checked, and it's like complicated, right? It's annoying, but it's so important. It's so important. I mean, look, Titus Davis, man, 27 years old. It's the saddest thing in the world, but
it's affecting our world.
It really is, man. And to think that, I mean, we're having this conversation in the United States of America, dude, right? Like, who knows what's happening everywhere else, right? People are just dying, right? They're just dying without being diagnosed. They're not getting their medications. It's terrible.
Yeah,
man.
You can compare it to what we're seeing with COVID. Let's say in India in particular, where kind of these remote areas where people don't have access to healthcare, it's hitting them the hardest because, like you said, they can't go see a doctor. They can, and so when you're talking about sickle cell outside of the United States, it's mostly like there's going to be in sub-Saharan Africa, and there's going to be parts of that continent where, just like India, they don't have access to healthcare professionals like we do in America. And so, what we're seeing here in the U.S. is, such a small scale compared to what we're seeing in Africa. And, we think it's bad here. It's so much worse outside of America. And it just goes to, but there is a problem in America as well, or access to healthcare facilities. The story I did a story last year on COVID and how it was particularly impacting Black people in Milwaukee. And Milwaukee isn't unique by any means, but Milwaukee is just like Detroit, just like New Orleans, just like Chicago, just like any place where there's a large concentration of Black people. And you're seeing that they're taking hospitals out of these communities. You're seeing that people don't have insurance, or they don't have access or can afford to go see someone if they have, like, say, Affordable Care Act or something like that. So even if someone felt comfortable going to the doctor's office to get that looked at, there's probably a low probability that they could even afford to go do it. And who knows how many people are out here walking around with these conditions, and they have no idea, what danger they may put themselves in just because they just don't know.
Man, we talk about disparities a lot, guys, and we know that every way you cut this, man, heart disease, cancer, kidney disease, pregnancy, infant death, the Black population suffers, right? The Black population is suffering. There's only two things that I call reverse disparities. There's two things that are more likely for a Black patient to get compared to a white patient. Do you know what those two things are? It's sickening. It's amputations of your limbs and antipsychotic medications. Those are the two things that if you're a Black patient, you're more likely to get. Everything else, as far as disease-saving, life-saving procedures go, you're less likely to get. That's the state of the healthcare system we're in right now, man. We got a long battle ahead of us.
Wow. Dr. Z, Dr. C, thank you guys for, covering these very important topics. The work that you're doing with the sickle cell community, it's going to change. And I can feel it, and I'm optimistic that we can do this together. That it's going to take an entire team of doctors, advocates, supporters, entertainers. Martenzie, you are amazing in covering this story, but more so doing it in the light of your family in this situation, but having more respect for all the others that have endured this condition, whether they were successful or unsuccessful. And to cover and understand, how sickle cell affects our community, I'm saddened that it took me 20-ish years to understand this condition in my life, and I had to affect someone else in order to understand that I can make a difference. And I'm definitely thankful that I was put in this position to make a difference in the sickle cell world. But I'm going to need everybody. I'm going to need all of you who are supporting me, supporting the NFL, Billy Garrett in the NBA. There's hockey players in the NHL, who are Black, Major League Baseball. Please speak up, about your condition. it gives these young kids an opportunity to believe in themselves that they too can be fighters, they can be warriors, and they will survive this. But it takes your courage to get up and stand and say and speak and advocate for the healthcare system that we African Americans need, more importantly, so that we can be strong survivors and providers of this world and for each of our families. So on behalf of Third and Long Foundation, Dr. Z, Dr. C, thank you guys for having me on Cheat Codes.
That was the best close I could have imagined right there, man. Thank you, Santonio, man. You're a finisher. What can I say?
I told you I'd show up in the fourth quarter, dude.
Third and long, man. You made it happen. But listen, man. Look, now you guys are connected, right? Martenzie, you've got this amazing platform. Man, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with now. Third and Long and Martenzie Johnson, the Undefeated, man. Make it happen. Let's use our platforms collectively to keep this fight going.
No, definitely. I appreciate you all having me on, and Santonio, thanks for joining us too.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for covering the story. Dr. Z, we could do something for these young kids whether these young kids who are athletes that are living with this condition, we can go out and start covering their stories and seeing how these kids are living, seeing the things that we can give them, the right toolkit to see them be more successul, in their journey.
We should just start with AAU and HBCUs and go from there, man.
You got it.
Yeah.
I've spoken with the Howard University president.
A sickle cell trait carrier. Yeah.
He's on board with supporting this, so we have a connection in the HBCU. Next, it is just getting all the medical examiners on board so that we could have this thing, actually gain some traction and keep moving forward.
My man. All right, with that, guys, we're going to close this episode of Cheat Codes. Thank you to Martenzie Johnson. Thank you to Santonio Holmes. Man, you guys are MVPs in my book, no matter what, Super Bowl or not. Sickle Cell MVPs, that's the only MVP that matters in my eyes. Thank you for being that. Peace.